This is Chapter 13.1 to 13.8 review. You can find these questions posted on Portal in the Files tab under Test Reviews, and you'll see Practice Test Chapter 13. So I'm going to go through each question one by one. The first question is find the GCF between x to the fourth, y to the fourth, x cubed, y squared, x cubed, y cubed, and negative xy. Now it's very important to remember what GCF means. Greatest common factor. So if something can divide into each one of these, then it's the greatest it's a common factor. And if it's the biggest thing that can divide into all of them, then it's the greatest common factor. So with variables, we always find the smallest degree. And the smallest degree can go into everyone. And that is only when we are looking for the GCF. You might remember the LCM, the least common multiple, in which you pick the largest degree. This is the GCF. So smallest degree wins, excuse me. So we have x to the fourth, x cubed, and x to the first. Well, x to the first is the smallest degree, so he wins. Now we'll look at the y's, and we view each variable separately. We have y to the fourth, y squared, y cubed, and y. Y is the smallest degree. Now you might be thinking, well, what about that negative? Well, everyone has to have it in them in order for us to have it as a GCF. There's no negative here, no negative here, no negative here, and one negative here. Since everyone doesn't have a negative, the negative is not part of the GCF. So our correct answer here is B. C and D make no sense to begin with. They're not even the highest degrees. The testing people are very nice. They don't try to trick you by providing an LCM, because the GCF and the LCM are easily confused, so you won't see that as an option. And an A is just trying to throw you off because of that negative. So the answer is B. Next question. Factor. And we have 6m to the 8th plus 21m to the 6th minus 30m squared. Well, when we factor, step 0 is to put in descending order. It has 8, 6, 2, it's already in descending order. So step 1, find a GCF. And I've done nonsense again to this thing. GCF. Pen, please. Okay. So we're going to compare 6, 21, and 30 all to one another. Notice that I didn't include that negative. Well, you could, but there's only one negative, and everyone has to be negative in order for us to have a GCF of negative. This guy's positive, and so is 6, so no luck there. So we're only looking at the positive versions. Now, if we don't right away see the GCF being the smallest number, like 6 can go into 35 times, but 6 can't go into 21 evenly. So he's not the GCF. So it's not immediately obvious. We're going to find the prime factorizations. And I'm going to, oh dear goodness. And I'm going to undo, we'll leave it. That's fine. It looks ugly, but we'll live. And then we'll do the prime factorization of 21, same deal, and 30. And our goal is to collect the largest group of primes that everyone shares. So everyone has to have the prime in order for us to collect it. Now let's see. We have a 2 here. It's kind of squished, but it's a 2. No 2s and 1 2. Does everyone have a 2? No. So since not everyone has a 2, 2's no good to us. We're not going to collect it. It's no good. Now let's see the next guy. He has a 3, he has a 3, and he has a 3. Since everyone has a 3, the GCF has a 3. And now we should check the next guys. There's a 7 here, no 7. Well, as soon as somebody doesn't share them, it's no good to us. There's a 5 down here. No one else has a 5 except him, so he's no good. The only one they all shared in common was the 3. So that's for constants. For variables, we look at the smallest degree. We have m to the 8th, m to the 6th, and m squared. Smallest degree is m squared. So there's our GCF. Now, when we find the GCF, our next step is to go ahead and factor. So we're going to factor out that GCF we just found. And now we have to figure out, well, what's left behind? So we'll ask ourselves, what times 3m squared will get us, and let me scoot back up there, 6m squared. So the first term, I might have to need to rewrite that. So 3 times 2 gets us 6. So there we are. And it needs m to the 8th. Well, we have 2 of them. We need 6 more, because 2 plus 6 is 8. So there we are. Now we continue on to the next part. We say, what times 3m squared will get us 21m to the 6? Well, 3 times 7 will get us 21. We have 2m's, so we need, how many did we need? I gotta cheat and look. We need 6. So we need 4 more m's, because 2 plus 4 is 6. And last but not least, we need a negative 30m squared. Well, 3 times 10 gets us 30, and there's that negative, so it's negative 30. And we already have the m squared, so we don't need any extra m's. So that's it. And now we could double check if we could factor this further. We cannot, so our choice is C. Question 3. Once again, it's a factor, is the directions. Now, when we look at this guy, he's actually much easier than our previous one. We have 7m, and then this ugly binomial, m minus 8 minus m, plus 6 times 8 minus m. And you might notice 8 minus m here is the same as 8 minus m there. That is actually our GCF. The GCF can be a binomial. So our GCF is that 8 minus m. And I'm going to include it in parentheses to keep myself safe, because that entire thing is coming out. Now we're going to factor out the GCF. And what we need to figure out is what times 8 minus m will get us 7m times 8 minus m. And pretty much whatever is in the front of the binomial, once we've factored it out, is what we need. So 7m. And then same deal here. We have plus 6n. So whatever's left over, that's what we need. And we can't factor that further. In fact, we are done. Now you look at your multiple choice answer and you're probably like, well, it's not there, you're wrong. Well, remember, this is multiplication between these two things. And multiplication can be done in any order. A times B is the same as B times A. They're exactly the same thing because of commutative law. So 7m plus 6n times 8 minus n is the same thing that I have here. Just be careful of choice C, in which you see that minus sign there. Very dangerous. They're trying to trick us, but we had a plus, okay? And then this other answer is, I have no idea where they came up with it. And no common factor would be if you got scared because of the binomial. So A is our winner. Next one, factor by grouping. We have x cubed minus 3x squared plus 6x minus 18. Now they were nice enough to tell us we are to factor by grouping. And when we factor by grouping, we group the first two together and the last two together. And it doesn't matter if these two are switched around, we'll still get the same thing. As long as we follow first two, last two. Doesn't make a difference. So between the first two, we're going to have to find the GCF. Well, we have a 1 really out front and a negative 3. So 1's the smallest guy, 1 can go into 3, 1's the GCF there. X cubed, x squared, smallest degree wins. So an x squared comes out, excuse me. Now left behind, we have an x minus 3. Because x squared times x is x cubed. X squared times negative 3 is negative 3x squared. And then we have plus, and we have to figure out what can pop out here. And I'm using plus because of this guy. I always want this to be positive, so I want to pull out positives. Sometimes this might be a negative, and we'll see a problem later on in the review about that. Now, between 6x and 18, and you do have minus 18, but they're both not negative, so we're not factoring out a negative. And we have 6 as our GCF. 6 can go into 18, and 6 can go into itself. X, and then no x's, so the smallest degree of x's is none of them. And we are left with x minus 3. And now you can throw a little party because we have x minus 3 repeated twice. And that's what grouping generally does. We have 4 terms. We factor out GCF between the first 2 and the last 2. And then a new GCF appears, in which we're going to factor out that new GCF. And left behind is the stuff in the front. So x squared, and that didn't circle quite well, plus 6. And now we just have to find which one is that. So we have an x minus 3 here, and x squared plus 6, so choice B. I don't quite understand choice 1, that's nonsense. Don't quite understand this choice. I can see where the sign error might happen here, so they might get stuck picking C, but otherwise it's pretty nice. Alright, number 5. We have x squared minus x minus 5, and it just tells us to factor. Now, the important part here is we have 3 terms, and the leading coefficient is 1. When the leading coefficient of 1, we find factors of C, whose sum is b. And if you're not aware, b here is negative 1. So we're looking for negative 1. Now, 45. We got 1 and 45. Well, 2 can't go in there. I think 3 can. 3 can go into there 15 times. 4 is not. 5 and 9. 6, no. 7, no. 8. I think we're pretty much it. So that's where we stand. And it's not too pretty. So remember, b determines the sign. B is negative, so the larger factors are negative. We need them to multiply together to get a negative, so the other factors have to be positive. And no one sums up to give us the b term. Now you can start doubting yourself, going, did I multiply these right? Or are these all the factors? And you could do that. You want to make sure you're comfortable with your table. But there is an option where when none of these add up to the b term, we say this is prime. And we could even kind of cheat, you know, because we're getting nervous. We could look at the multiple choice. Now, your actual test won't have as much multiple choice, but the final exam will have multiple choice. So it's a good double checker for the final if you are nervous with it being the final and cumulative. You could do, well, negative 5 plus 9 is 4. And that's not there, so this guy doesn't work. Now what I'm doing is I'm adding the outside terms together to see who gives me b. Negative 45 plus 1 is negative 44, still not the b term, so that's no good. I'll scribble it out. And then we have 5 plus negative 9 is negative 4, and that's still no good. So the only guy who worked was the prime one, because no one else did. It's a bad habit if you ever have it where you're saying, well, when in doubt, I'll just say it's prime. Just be careful with it, okay? Just list out as many factors as you can, try your best, and really go, okay, did I find all the factors? And if you need to, if you're ever in doubt, you can do the prime factorization. Like, I know for sure 5 and 9 is 45. Maybe I wasn't too certain about 3 and 15. But 5 is prime, 9 breaks down into 3 and 3, and there's the prime factorization. And we could see here 5 times 9, or we could say 5 times 3 is 15 times 3, aha, or 45 and the 1. And that's as many combos as we can get. So you can always double check yourself with something you do know. We do know 5 times 9 is 45. And we could find all factors from there if you're ever in doubt. And if you have more questions on that, you can see me in office hours. 6, it's factor. We have x cubed minus x squared minus 42. Now I've been kind of cheating and ignoring our fact that we have a step 1 always, which is to find the GCF. If there's a GCF, we factor it out. Sometimes it's 1 and that's boring, so we don't even touch it. But here we actually do have a GCF, and it's something other than 1. It's x. Very interesting, something interesting. So we're going to factor out that GCF, and left behind is a nice trinomial. Now, after we factor out a GCF, we don't say we're done. In fact, you could see any of your multiple choice answers, none of them have it. But we sure know one thing. We have x times something, so there's no way it could be prime because we've written it as a factored form. We just got to keep on going. Now, this polynomial here, its leading coefficient is a 1. So we're going to list out factors of our c, whose sum will be our b. Now, we got 1 and 42, oh, I don't know, lots of things, and eventually we'll find 6 and 7, in which b determines the sign, so we have a negative. The other guy has to be positive. Positive times negative is a negative, and sure enough, 6 plus negative 7 is negative 1. So our factor form of just this guy is x plus 1 factor, and x plus the other factor. And now the most important thing to do is to not forget your GCF. So we have x plus 6 times x minus 7, and we're done. And now we just got to figure out which multiple choice answer that is. Let's see, I can't fit that all on one page for the screen. Choice B is kind of silly, don't know where they got that from. What did we have? Positive 6, negative 7? Okay, so there's our winner. And then this guy, they just switched the sign, so you got to be very, very careful. So our choice is C. Number 7. This one's funky. In fact, we saw this on our worksheet. We went over this in class as well. The problem is, this is not our usual form of x squared plus bx plus c. We have p to the 4th and p squared. But remember, I always say look at b. Look at that b term. He tells us so much information. This p squared, maybe he's my basis. He's my starting point. Maybe x is really p squared. And if I were to take x squared, would that be p to the 4th? Well, let's see. I could rewrite this. I could write, instead of p to the 4th, p squared, power raised to a power multiply, 2 times 2 is 4, alright, minus 11, p squared, and now I'm going to view this guy as my missing blank. He's my x, really. I have x squared and x, plus my c. So, I know this is going to look ugly, but I'm going to draw it. This is really x squared, and this is x. So he is of our standard form. And when we factor this guy, the leading coefficient is a 1. So we find factors of c whose sum is b. Well, we have negative 11, so chances are factors are going to both be negative because that determines the sign, and this is positive. And 8 and 3 are our winners. So we're going to have x, so to speak, plus 1 factor times x plus the other factor. But it's not really x who we're talking about here. Our x, we were kind of giving him a rude disguise of what really was there, which is p squared. And now we have to double check if we could factor further. And we cannot. So we have to find it. Well, this is negative and a positive, so that's silly, no good. Negative and a negative, but it's not the right factors. Oh, there's our negative and a negative, so there we are. And then this one said there was a GCF, which makes no sense. We didn't have that at all. Alrighty. Number 8, I think, is going to be the last one for this video, and then I'll split up the rest of the review into more parts. So those links will be sent to you shortly. For number 8, we have u squared minus 4uv minus 32v squared. Now, for these, we usually put them in descending order. I don't really know if u comes before v in the alphabet. I'm assuming it does. U squared is positive, and this guy has ugly stuff in front of him, so I kind of like where he is. So I'm going to say it's in descending order. I'll check for a GCF. There is none, so that's boring. And now, what we got to look at is the c. V here is treated like a constant. So we're looking at negative 32, v squared. And remember, b gives us hints. Notice how there's a v there. Well, I bet if I were to break up v and v times v is v squared, and if I add two v's together, I'll get some constant coefficient, v. Now I just need to figure out the stuff in the front. which is dependent on the 32. Well, negative 32. And this is negative, so we know it's going to have a negative somewhere. Excuse me. So we got to think of two things that multiply together to get 32. How about 8 and 4? And you might be sneaking a peek looking at this stuff going, oh, they got 8s and 4s there. Maybe that's a good guess. I would utilize that, but don't get into a habit for the review thinking of that, because your test, as I said, will have free response on it. Because you could just foil these and work backwards, multiple choice is inefficient to test you if you know how to factor. Now, the sign was negative, so the bigger factor is negative, and that means the smaller factor has to be positive. Alrighty, so good start. And positive 4 minus 8v is negative 4v. So, leading coefficient was a 1. We have u plus 1 factor times by, and my u's and v's look very similar, so let me add a hook on the u, minus the other factor. And the only one who wins is choice C. And I'm going to stop the recording for now, and we will finish the rest in part 2.